Thank you to Dr. Oban for letting us host this meeting in his facility here. My name is Gabe Schell. I'm the city engineer for the city of Bismarck. And if you're here, it's because you are interested in Ash Coulee Drive, so welcome. These meetings are fun for us because of you showing up and wanting to learn more about what we're planning on doing and how we plan on doing it. So I don't really have any other remarks besides that. We'll have the project team from KLJ and Bolton and Mank introduce themselves and walk through our proposed improvements. And at the end, we'll have time and an opportunity for any questions you may have.
All right, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Carl Jackson with KLJ. We've got a lot of members of our team here, and so thanks very much for coming, and we're looking forward to visiting with all of you. And so whether it's in this situation, this forum here, or afterward while we're all in the rear again, just come and visit with us and get to know more about your project. As Gabe mentioned, this is the public input meeting. We'd like to take a minute to quickly introduce our speakers. You met Gabe. Again, I'm working with Adam, Pat, and the rest of our project team, Mike, the rest of our project team. Mike's going to be giving the bulk of our presentation tonight. Mike is our traffic expert and transportation planning guru, and so he's going to walk you through how we got to where we are tonight. And then Adam's going to kind of wrap it up and then facilitate some of the questions and answers toward the end. So some of our goals for tonight. First step is to inform you of the project. We just want to make sure you understand generally the nature of what we're talking about doing here and make sure you have a good understanding. So not only do you understand yourself, but you can also help communicate this message to your neighbors and friends and whatnot. And then we'll get into a deeper dive of the proposed alternatives. Again, that's going to be more of the nuts and bolts that Mike covers here in a couple minutes. And so then the last part is extremely critical, and it's to get your input. I've had a couple questions tonight about, where are we in the decision-making process? And we are still in the decision-making process, and this is part of it. And so we definitely want your engagement and your input, whether that's tonight. You can visit with us in person. You can leave comments on the comment cards in the back, and we'll get into this later, but there's also an opportunity to comment and review the project on the city's website. And so there are lots of opportunities to engage and provide your input, and we'd love to hear from you. This map should look familiar to you. It was in, if you received a mailing, it was in your mailer, it's in your packets tonight. It's just a quick snapshot of the scope, the general scope of this project. And so starting from west to east, you see on the left side of the screen is Tyler Parkway, and then we'll continue to the east all the way, not quite to Washington, but almost to North Washington. And those of you that know this corridor, you know that that little segment just west of the Washington and 43rd Avenue intersection has already been complete. So we'll just tie into that segment that's already been complete. You can see the little jogs in the yellow line. That's just indicating some intersections where we're acknowledging that we might need to do some minor repairs at the intersections, but really the general nature of this project is to just improve the Ash Coulee Drive corridor itself. And then we'll just make sure we have a smooth transition at the intersections, and so that's where you're seeing those little jogs. All right, as promised, before I hand it off to Mike, I almost forgot, housekeeping thing. If you go straight out the back door, if you're looking for a restroom, they're right across the hall there. And so make sure you know where those are, and then help yourself to cookies and coffee, hot chocolate, and water in the back on this side too. So again, thanks for coming. I'm turning it over to Mike here.
So we have a variety of different improvements along the corridor. So I'm going to start by breaking it down into smaller pieces and then kind of putting that puzzle back together. It just helps us explain how we got to where we are here today. And so as we start from a safety standpoint, the first thing we looked at was the pedestrian and bicycle network. And so we're all familiar with that. We've got the shared use path on one side that crosses over, and it really does force us to cross at very specific locations, and it funnels us into different areas. And so as we looked at the overall network and where people were crossing, we found that we had over 220 people crossing Ash Coulee every day. And so we wanted to make sure we had a good approach to being able to facilitate them at the locations we want, so that we can make it safer at those specific areas. And so this is just a graphic of the cross section. You can see it's 3 lanes, And then we have a sidewalk on the south side and a shared use path on the north side. And so that'll allow us to have that continuity, but we're also able to move people from side to side. So today, for example, a lot of people cross at Valley because they have to, but if we can make that connection over to Horizon Middle School, we might be able to move them to a location that has improved crossing facilities. We also, as part of the project, include a center left turn lane. And I think that that's the comment I heard the most while I was at the boards earlier was one car turns and the whole corridor stops, right? And so just by adding center left turn lanes, we're able to reduce delays at our key intersections really anywhere from, this graphic shows 30 to 70% in the future. Today, it's more like 20 to 40% just by not having those bottlenecks, which then also improves safety. We don't have the potential for rear ends, or I even heard some stories earlier about people flying around passing them as well. I also got a lot of questions about traffic speeds. We collected traffic speeds along the corridor at 2 locations, and so hard to tell from this graphic, but the top is a graphic near the water tower and the bottom is near Golden Wave Drive. What's really most important is that there's 2 different distinct speed limits here, the blue line. So on the east side, we got 35 miles per hour, and on the west side, 25 miles per hour. However, our speeds that people drive are actually 35 miles per hour throughout the corridor. And so regardless of where you are, and typically drivers drive what the road's designed at, not what the signs say. And so we want to make sure our design matches what we're trying to accomplish with the corridor. And that has some direct impacts to safety for pedestrians that you can see on the right side of the screen there. And so you're 90% less likely to have a serious impact with the driver going 20 miles per hour than you are at 40. And so as we start to look at this 3-lane section, we look for opportunities to add what's called a refuge island, which just as you can see in the bottom left of the screen here, is just an opportunity for you to cross one approach of traffic at a time. You get in the middle, you check the other direction, you go across, and that's been proven to reduce crashes by almost 50%. But it also just creates some friction, and it can actually reduce our traffic speeds at the locations we really are wanting to slow those traffic speeds. So it's a good complement to the design that we're proposing with those 3-lane section. We also directly in front of the school, we would propose a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I won't pull up the video unless anyone's curious. If they're on 43rd Avenue just to the east, it's just a special type of beacon that you can see in the image on the top right. It just flashes, you press the push button, it turns on only when it's needed. And it just improves alertness to drivers that there is a pedestrian crossing there. And so just having an elevated sense of awareness for that really important crossing location. We also want to talk about traffic efficiency, and that center turn lane does help explain some of that. But we use a term called level of service, which is maybe just a term that helps engineers feel important, but really it's just a grading scale that grades infrastructure's efficiency. So as you look at the vehicles, you can see in the green, A, that's our level of service A. At the bottom, F, that's F. And so you're just kind of saying A through F. We don't want to be at the bottom, right? We want to improve traffic flow, so it's kind of in that B-C range. And so as we look at our traffic volumes, they're actually quite a bit lower than what it feels like they are today. We only have about 3,000 to 5,000 cars per day. And in the future, we are projecting increased traffic volumes with the better connectivity to the west and potential developments or other regional significant improvements. And so we're seeing, that grow at about 40 to 70%. You can see 65,000 to 85,000 just east of Horizon Middle School, or about 45,000 to 65,000 west. And so what does that mean? So by comparison, 43rd Avenue to the east of Washington Street is more than double that on really any stretch. However, this corridor does have some pretty unique traffic flow. So in the morning, which you're all very aware of, is we have the convergence of both school and the neighborhoods coming into town. And so that eastbound traffic flow is over 75%, and we have twice as much traffic than what we would expect. And so while it is only 3,000 to 5,000 cars, it really feels like twice as much because they're all occurring one direction at the same time. And so coming back to that level of service, we want to avoid those Fs. And so during our AM peak hour, we do have deficient operations in front of the school. And otherwise, the rest of the day, 23 of the 24 hours, it does operate quite effectively. But as we move into the future, and so this is we grow traffic to 2045 to make sure that we're building improvements that aren't just fixing today's problems, but they're trying to anticipate tomorrow's problems as well. So this is 2045. So during the AM peak, we have a lot of red. During the after school release period, we have a lot of red. And then even during the PM peak hour, so think 5 o'clock, we have a lot of red. And so it really points us to the fact that we want to look at different ways to improve traffic flow directly in front of the school. And so you've seen in the boards in the back, we do have a very different approach directly in front of the school in terms of controlling traffic. So really starting from west to east, you can see that a roundabout's proposed at Valley Drive. This helps minimize those deficient traffic flow issues, but it also helps to control some of those traffic speed issues. It just naturally calms that corridor, particularly if you're coming from the west to the east through the school area. Then at our west driveway, we reconfigured traffic to really primarily come into that driveway. You can see we have an added lane coming from the west and stopping there. I'm not sure if you're able to grab a little pen here. So you can see we've got a new lane that's added there, and then we also add another lane here. And so from the section from the school to Washington Street, we're actually looking at 4 lanes of through traffic, really to help minimize some of that congestion that we have directly in front of the school. And so these 3 improvements, and I'll talk about that east driveway on the next slide, but in combination, when we look at that future congestion as traffic continues to build, we're showing 70 to 90% reduction in overall delays. So, opening day when this is improved, it's probably more 30 to 50%, but you'll definitely feel the release of pressure. And then a reduction of serious conflict points by 75%. So none of those angled conflict points that are more likely to result in a serious crash. So here's just a zoom in of that east driveway. You can see that the reason why this works so effectively in this instance is in the AM peak hour, we have so much traffic fighting for that singular eastbound lane. Now by adding that extra through lane and with that median, it allows us to channelize that traffic out of the middle school into the new lane, and then the through traffic from the neighborhoods can go in the opposing lane. And we'll eventually have to mix as you move downstream, but we have a lot of space to be able to do that. We also looked at internal school operations, and this is pretty unique from a project standpoint from the city's perspective. Typically, we stick within the roadway right-of-way, but because of the clear marriage between the operations and inefficiencies of the corridor and the school, we looked a little bit closer specifically at how traffic moves directly in front of the school. And so with anyone that has a student that's been to the middle school, they've dealt with the pictures that you can see on the top right and the bottom right. And it's pretty unique that we've got our middle school on the fringe, and we have people traveling pretty far distances to come in, drop their kid off, and then come back out. And so it really creates that come in, come out in a really short period of time. And so there was a recent study of this school, and there was lots of comments. Traffic speed's a concern, illegal parking blocking crosswalks, cars avoid the school and park in neighborhoods, and then unpredictable drop-offs, students weaving through 3 lanes of cars. And so the concept, we looked at a variety of concepts, and I should mention that everything today that we're showing you has gone through a very thorough vetting process of eliminating other bad options, comparing and contrasting other different options to really see what fits best for the context and needs of the corridor, and this is no exception in front of the school. And so zooming in a little bit here, you can see it kind of turns our traffic flow in front of the school into a 3-step process. You can see that we have a median. You're forced to come from the opposite direction now based on the way that traffic circulates in front of the school. You pull through, you drop off, kind of like an angled parking spot, and then you pull through on the opposing lane. And this is really inspired from a an airport pickup and drop off. I think we've all been to airports where we've seen the same challenges that we see at the school here today, where 3 lanes of traffic, someone gets stuck. You know, specifically at the school, individuals are trying to get to the very front so their student can go right to the front of the school. But at St. Louis Airport, this operates very effectively, and it feels like it doesn't have any congestion or people going to the airport, but it just works well enough that people aren't getting stuck. And you're not going to be stuck in that lane for 7 minutes because you can't get out. You'll be able to come in, drop your student off, and then pull through. And so we develop fancy computer models to make sure that these ideas actually work. And so I should have also showed the existing conditions, but it looks like it does today. It's all blocked off and bottlenecked. But this is the same traffic put into this new configuration. You know, they're not all coming in at angled. It's just the way the model kind of works. But you can really see that with that exact same amount of traffic, how minimal congestion that we do have, because we are able to pull them through and people don't get stuck by those illegal movements. And you can tell that that's an early cut of what we've developed here tonight. There's a couple of nuances that have changed. Obviously, we're coming from west to east now. And also there's just some nuance with how we're going to access that parking lot from the school that we're still, up in the air. And the school typically blocks off that one access. But overall, this concept, after modeling it before and after, we're showing between a 40 to 76% reduction in delays during those peak periods, and a 36 to 91% reduction in conflict points between students and drivers and other drivers. It also helps delineate some of that central crossing if you're coming from Ash Coulee. But we would, if something like that were to be built, it's clear that we need some education and enforcement when it starts to make sure that it does work the way that we're intending. So I've pulled everything apart. I've got all the puzzle pieces lying out on the table just to help explain those individual decision points. But now I want to bring it all back so you can kind of see it all come together. So a summary of roadway improvements. We have a 2-way left turn lane for about 2/3 of the corridor. We've got ped bike facilities on both sides of the corridor. We have those refuge islands. This is a good graphic to show you the 4 locations where we're strategically improving crossing locations. We also have that rectangular rapid flashing beacon built on top directly in front of the middle school. And then we have the improved traffic flow directly in front of the school at the roundabout, and then that T intersection. And that T, Gabe made a good point when we were going through the slideshow, is that something similar, if you're trying to imagine what that looks like, is State Street east of the Capitol. There is a new lane added for that T intersection. The big difference here is we have a median preventing people from getting in your lane, and obviously it'd be a lot slower. So it's not an overly unique or bizarre solution, something that we already do here today, but just designed in a fashion to work a little bit better. And then finally, we would have a summer, and we'd finally have the improvements in front of the school as well.
I'd also like to discuss with you some of the other impacts on the project that the project has on the surrounding area. So, common environmental impact that is discussed often is wetlands, and it's always an issue with roadway projects, and there are wetlands along this project here. These photos down here on the bottom are examples of what you would see in the field if you were standing on the roadway right now. This is from our wetland report showing kind of the impacts, and we're anticipating probably around about a 1/2 acre of impacts on the wetlands. There's also right-of-way impacts and impacts to hills out there. We're up by the water tower here. You can see that the profile of the roadway, if you just kind of cut a line down the middle of the road and looked at it horizontally, we'd have this big hump here, and it doesn't provide proper sight distance for people driving on the roadway there. And so this project will look at cutting down that top of that hill in order to provide the sight distance needed to provide safe traffic situations out there. This will obviously have a little bit of impact on the water tower property and then the property on the south there. And in addition to that, the very obvious roundabout down here, see if I can circle it. That area will obviously we tried to push the roundabout to the north so it doesn't impact the properties on the south nearly as much, and it takes up the unused space that the school has there. And so we'll be getting some right away from the school as well. One thing that you're probably all thinking about is how much is this costing and where is it coming from, that money, obviously, because it's on everybody's mind. Well, as you can see here, about $11 million, $11,400,000. It'll include all the roadway improvements, lighting improvements along the corridor, storm sewer, landscaping, water and sewer. Water improvements alone are about $1 million here. Also, the good news, though, is that the funding is already been in process and in place for some period of time. The half-cent sales tax that was approved in 2018 is what it's going to be paying for this project. It's not going to be assessed to any part of it. I don't believe any part of this will be assessed to the residents. Is that correct, Gabe? You can correct me.
Yeah, so the only correction or caveat I put on all of this is that we have that 2018 ballot that approved funding for half-cent sales tax for these exact types of projects. And as we propose our budgets to the commission, the city commission would ultimately make the decision. They just haven't made that decision for this project yet, but it would be my recommendation to fund this with the available half-cent sales tax, similar to the funding package that was put together on the previous 43rd Avenue project, as well as the project being constructed this summer between State Street and 26th Street. So I can't commit a commission to make any decision just yet, and even a commission can't commit future commissions to those decisions. But this is the path that we're going down, and the path that we'd recommend is using the half-cent sales tax to fund this project.
Thank you, Gabe. Also, construction is always a big topic on these projects, and how is it going to impact you? Because you're the ones that have to live with this project while it's being built all summer long out there. And I can't give you all the answers on the construction phasing and detours. A lot of that will be determined by the contractor. He'll submit a plan to the city and to the engineers for approval on how he proposes to phase and provide detours and access to all the residents. But the project will provide access to all residents at all time out here through temporary detours, temporary paths through construction if needed. Obviously, there are some portions of some residents that, they're kind of cut off. If Ash Coulee is closed, they can't get to their property. There will be temporary accesses placed out there for you guys to get to your property through the construction. We'll also be placing some requirements on the contractors. So segment E here, the east segment, this one in particular will have a certain timeline restrictions because of the school there. We need to have it running for the school without hindering access because we have so many cars that come for that. And so we'll be putting in the contract documents that the contractor cannot start that portion of the roadway until after school is done, and he has to have it up and running again before school starts. And so we'll be implementing all of these restrictions on the contractor so that he'll be required to provide access and good time frames for the construction of this project. So coming up from here, what are the next steps on this project? Right now, we are at the public input meeting here in February. We've already completed our environmental traffic studies and surveys out there, basically have all the preliminary work done, came up with the project concepts that we are presenting to you here today. And then after that, next month here, we plan on presenting these concepts to the city commission and getting their approval. And once we have their approval, we'll be going to design and talking with residents about any right-of-way needs and trying to get the project fully ready for a 2023 construction. This will be bid next winter, hopefully around November, December next year. This will be out to bid for contractors, and we'll get costs from them. And then starting as early as they probably can in the spring, April, May timeframe, the construction would start. So we want you to be involved in this project. We want to hear your concerns. You're the ones that live here. You know this corridor better than anybody else. So please, talk to us. You can also send comments. My email address is here. It's also in a lot of the advertisements, my contact information. I believe it's in the handouts you guys can take up there, and I have business cards. Feel free to email me or send a letter to me. There's also this input ID here. It's an online tool that you can access through the city's website. Where am I? There's my mouse. So if you go to the city's website here, you can access this online tool, and actually I'll invite Mike up to kind of walk through its use really quick, just so you guys can have a quick overview. Wow. I can't get it off the, well, if you go to the city's website, it's a pretty intuitive way to do it. You can drop a comment on any location on the corridor, and you can tell us what you think about that, if there's a problem and so forth. So we'll take care of it, and please let us know what you think. So with that, I'll open up for questions. Carl will be walking around with a mic here so that everybody can hear the question, and we'll go with that. Any questions?
Is there curb and gutter on the new road all the way to Washington?
Yeah, the intent will be to have curb and gutter. I believe the very western end of it may not have it, right as you approach Tyler Parkway, that last segment, because it's kind of undeveloped out there so far, but the intent is to have curb and gutter along the project.
Okay, you're talking about a 4-lane going east. Well, that bottleneck's down the signal lane as soon as you got top of the road.
Yeah, you are very correct in that. The intent is that we'd probably have to go out right at Washington where that concrete is there. We'd have to take the curb off that south end where it bottles neck down to 1 lane and add a 2nd lane to it there. So we'd have to go a little bit further into the newer work to add that 2nd lane.
Hey, on the roundabout, why not a three-way stop?
Mike, do you want to, why don't you talk about what the logistics and what the numbers we're looking at for the roundabout and one-way stop?
Yeah, so we did look at a variety of different traffic control devices there and in and around that area, including, I imagine some people are wanting a traffic signal. There's certain traffic volume thresholds that must be met to put certain traffic control devices in, because it's just, for example, if you put a signal at the wrong location, it's been proven to actually increase crashes because it affects driver expectancy. So that particular location did not meet the requirements to have an all-way stop or a traffic signal. And an all-way stop, really the reason why that it doesn't work very well there is you typically want an all-way stop to have even distribution of cars. Otherwise you might end up, because it's kind of a 10-to-1 on those two approaches. So you'd end up with 10 cars stacked up with 1 car coming up and being able to turn out. So it's really about a combination of safety and traffic flow that goes into some of those analyses.
So what happens to the ditch on the south side of Ash Coulee, from the Valley Drive to the ditch and then the big culvert goes under there?
Yeah, the ditchway. There'll be a variety of treatments to handle stormwater out here, and some of the ditches will be going away, some of them will be staying, some of them will be modified. The intent is that a lot of this will be going into underground storm sewer out there. But how we get the water to the storm sewer, we will still have to have some ditches in certain locations. And we don't have all the locations and what it's going to look like everywhere figured out quite yet. But it'll be a combination of some ditches that leads to the storm sewer, which leads out to the natural drainage paths out there.
So just based on, you showed us the numbers, the current numbers. I live right along Ash Coulee, and I'm glad you guys talked about that because except for about 40 minutes, 2 times a day, 9 months a year, there's no traffic flow issues on Ash Coulee. Like the road handles the traffic really, really well now, knowing that there could be more, but based on even those projected, the design, it seems like we're doing a lot of road design, and I know we have some potential west build connection yet, but based on where we are now, it feels like a lot of road for the number of cars. So can you talk about, where are we sitting in that? Because it feels like a lot of road for the number of cars that are driving.
Yeah, and so as you look at the overall ADTs, so the daily traffic volumes, they are very low. And like I said, it's just a very unique traffic flow situation where everyone's going the same direction and a lot of people are happening at the same time. So you're right, it feels like it's twice as much during those hours, but then it feels like it's half as much during the other hours, correct? And so there is always that balancing point of how much pain is too much pain during the worst hours to balance things out during the off-peak. And so as we did talk through that, certainly, and there were some other concepts that improved traffic even further. But what we found is we started to add even a little bit of traffic in front of the school. It really started to break down pretty quickly. And so it wasn't just 1 hour in the future. Instead, it started to be multiple hours in the future. You know, the AM drop off, the PM school release, and then the PM peak hour at 5 o'clock all started to break down with even moderate amounts of increased traffic flow. And so once we started seeing some of that, we wanted to make sure that we were, safeguarding ourselves from a future that can happen faster than we anticipate, while still balancing the overall neighborhood feel and needs of the corridor. So it's mostly a 3-lane, but really it's just that stretch that it has the school in front of it to Washington Street, which already is about halfway 5 lanes anyways. So we just made those connections, and we were able to mitigate those bottlenecks without having to widen the entire corridor. Is that properly?
What happens when you're going west over the top of the hill, and then you're approaching where the cars are exiting the school? There's no stop sign there or nothing, is there? I mean, you're gonna come down that hill and approach, cars coming out of the school. So, you know what I'm talking about? When you're going west, particularly down the hill, and you're meeting cars coming out of the school parking lot.
Yep, and you certainly will still have to yield to those drivers as you come out of the school. We do have an extra lane that does drop directly into that west school, so there's 2 lanes. And so again, as you add that extra lane, you just allow for more gaps in traffic to be able to get through. So it's not that one continuous line. And so it really, similar to that model I showed you in front of the school, we like to test everything in that modeling environment to understand whether we expect it to work or not. And we calibrate it to what it feels like today. And we're showing that it does work pretty well as you move through that area.
And also, talking about non-school hours, traffic flow. Well, all that means with non-school hours is to come down and go faster. That's terrible.
In a better road, potentially be better.
Yep, and so we do like the combination in this area of the roundabout with those medians, just trying to create some unnatural friction as you're coming through to prevent you from being able to fly through it. So there's some double purposes in some of these different concepts, really, with the idea that we want the roadway to match the context in which it's being built. As best we can, certainly.
So on the west driveway coming out of the school, it looks like you can't take,
Yep.
So you can't go east. So if you're gonna be, how are you going to go east on that?
Right, so the idea is since we're revising how traffic circulates on the inside, let's go back.
So that's the reason for the roundabout.
That, certainly you can do that, but as you look at the way that school is now progressing from west to east, our primary exit for the school would be that east driveway. And so that's why that one's improved. And so, yeah, you're right, you can't make that left.
But the flow in the morning, when you're dropping off a student, you can't come back out of that driveway.
Yep, and so as you look at this graphic, you can see that our traffic flow is no longer, so we're coming the opposite direction to respond to that. So you kind of see those red arrows on there? And so it almost became and that's why that video that we showed earlier of the school is going the other way, is because we tested it the normal direction, but because of the configuration that we needed on Ash Coulee to get this to work the best way possible, we had to revert flow through that area. And so it'll just change the way you come through the school.
Okay.
We can't get a stop. We have to go roundabout. We figured that's the best option there for on that street. I mean, I just think the roundabout is the worst idea ever. I don't think it slows down any traffic whatsoever. My kids cross that street and someone hauling through there, I just don't see them slowing down for any kid on a roundabout. I just don't think they're gonna, I think it's terrible. I'm sorry, but I worry for my kids crossing there who are going to the free splash park that's down that road. A ton of kids cross there, a ton of pets cross there. I just don't, you can't put a stop sign and the city won't allow that. They'd rather have a roundabout that people are gonna haul ass through. I mean, I just don't see people slowing down enough to cause, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but I mean, I know I've driven through roundabouts and I don't slow down. You know, I mean, I don't think it's gonna slow the traffic whatsoever.
So the question's about traffic speeds through a roundabout. And so you can see that it's intentionally a pretty big roundabout that you couldn't go straight if you wanted to at your driving speed. So it is designed to push traffic in that 20 to 15 miles per hour zone. So I mean, especially if you're coming from the west, you really have to hit right into that roundabout. So it forces you to slow down, but it also forces you to be more alert because of all the different directions. And so nationally, and I doubt this will help, but nationally they do study roundabout safety from a pedestrian standpoint. They do find it to be quite a bit safer than the two-way stop control that would be there today currently.
Is there at all? I mean, that kids can push, or, you know, like I'm on my bike, I'm not paying attention, I'm gonna push this button and go, and the cars will stop. I mean, it's not.
There is one just one block to the east here, and so directly in front of the school. So if you don't feel comfortable with the roundabout,
Right, but the splash park is there.
sure, yeah.
Oh, you know, and there's a lot of kids that go there, and I just think that maybe something can be rethought in that area that would help kids who aren't paying attention to cars and just assume they're gonna stop for them, you know, help that maybe a little.
Yeah, we're very open to any ideas you have, and if you want to put a comment in, or we'll even make record of this comment, you know, this is something that we can talk with the city engineer and the city council and see if that's something that they are willing to implement and add to the project. So, thank you.
I'd like to second the stop sign instead of the roundabout. When was the study done on the traffic? Because I've noticed even since the road was complete back here, that traffic has increased quite a bit from the west. And I'm thinking there's going to be more as we get more and more development. And there's people coming through that are kind of skipping some of the other areas and using that cut across now. And I know I've seen way more traffic in the morning starting last fall through this winter than I have had. Because I come out there every day. And I'm just wondering when those traffic studies were done compared to when that road was actually finished.
Yeah, so the question was that you're in favor of a two-way stop there, and when were the traffic studies done to compare with this? And do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, they were completed late this fall, so the data was all collected and analyzed really into this past winter. So post that roadway coming in.
Okay, just a comment about the roundabout. I like roundabouts when they're appropriate. In this case, it's caught my right away, and I don't know that it's appropriate at this point. Roundabouts are intended to keep traffic moving, to do away with four-way stops. This one will keep traffic moving, but you've got a crosswalk on the west side, right near the roundabout. Traffic's not going to stop there, the pedestrians go, even though the pedestrian has the right of way. So that's a safety hazard right there. I don't know what's wrong with just keeping it a straight road, introducing some caution lights, that kind of thing, but it seems like the roundabout to me is way overboard for this intersection.
Okay, the comment was that the roundabout might be a little bit much for the intersection, and, you know, per those traffic studies that we did, it was looking like it accomplished what the purpose is on this project, but we appreciate the comment for sure, and we can definitely put that on the record.
This goes beyond just the Ash Coulee construction, but has there ever been any thought to modifying the drop-off point so that everyone's not going in and out of Ash Coulee, stopping off and going on out north and then back over to Washington? More of a circle instead of people coming in and out of the same road after dropping kids off. Because there's a road to the north, and be modifying the parking lot so people could actually use that road, could be a way to just reduce some of the congestion on Ash Coulee.
So the question was about the circulation within the school itself and whether or not we looked at bringing people instead of from Ash Coulee back onto Ash Coulee, take them off Ash Coulee and bring them up to Medora Drive. Is that the correct question?
I don't know the name of the road, it's a north road.
Yeah, the north road there. And I believe that that movement is currently actually being used out there to an extent. The people that want to, they are able to drive around the backside and go out there. And I know personally when I drove this with my daughter, I did go out that backside quite often. And there are a lot of people that do that out there. I believe, and that was built into the model that movement was built into the model that we studied with this site.
I guess I had a question. I'm really glad that you looked at the school because that definitely is the common denominator. So every time there's an issue, it's in that intersection. It doesn't feel like there's as many issues other places. But I think my headed back to this may be outside, but from the flow, is there a north-south connect? Because I think the reason why when we talk about the flow on Valley is so high because if there's something happening on Washington, there's something happening on State, or something happening on Centennial, you push that traffic, continue to push that traffic west. And I think what we saw was that there's going to be a lot of traffic on the Valley. And so one of my questions was, as you continue to plan to build to the west, do we have another north-south connection? Because if we do, then this build-out makes a lot more sense. There's not another north-south connection plan further west, then it doesn't make as much sense because you're still driving all that traffic back to Valley and all that traffic back to Washington because of the way Bismarck is geographically.
So the question was related to a north-south connection to the west to try to relieve pressure. And we did analyze that in our future conditions options as making that connection to Tyler Parkway and tested what that traffic would look like. And so I moved through that pretty quickly and thinking it's a little technical, but we did look at 4 different scenarios regionally and what happens with growth to the west, just to get a better understanding, because we can't predict the future, but we can certainly understand pros and cons of different scenarios. And so that all fed into our analysis of the various scenarios, is understanding what could potentially happen and what the risks are of each choice.
Is it in the future plans to bring Tyler Parkway from where it is now to where it goes by Elbridge? Is there plans to bring Tyler north-south? Right now, you can't just go around and then you go to the camp. Is there plans to bring that north-south?
Yeah, so the question was about Tyler Parkway connecting fully to the south there, all the way down toward the interstate. And right now it does connect all the way up north to the next corridor going east-west over there. And going south, I believe there are concepts of plans going to the south, connecting it down toward the Lowe's area. And right now there are roundabout ways to get it out that direction, not on Tyler Parkway, but on the other roads through there. But I don't know of any concrete plans on that. Do you want to speak to that, Gabe?
Yeah. So the city doesn't have any plans in the next, let's say, 5-year time frame to build that roadway, or to even engage in that community conversation to whether or not we should have that roadway, at what point we should, what are the triggers, and what's the best for the community. We haven't really had that conversation yet. However, that roadway is one of the eligible projects on this same half-cent sales tax, just like 43rd and South Washington's and State Street and other corridors that we have in our community that we've identified a need. And so it's just a question of, will the need of Tyler Parkway raise above the need to build out other segments of 43rd Avenue, or construct segments of State Street or US 83 with additional local share versus the typical state and federal share? Those are all questions that we don't have answers to right now, but I would say it's in the realm of possibility because we do have a revenue source identified that is this half-cent sales tax for a period of time, and we do have that project on the list of eligible. So it's not a far-fetched conclusion to think that could happen at some point. That's not something that we are actively pursuing at this point in time.
I have a few questions or comments. If you would, please go back to the graphic where you have the roundabout showing. Okay, I drive this road and I drive it for 6 to 8 times per day. We typically come from the west, and from what I see coming through the roundabout, that is the pinch point. Instead of the pinch point being directly in front of the outlets of the school, you're just pushing your pinch point back to the west side of the roundabout. One question is, how many car lengths are there between the roundabout and the west entrance into the middle school in this traffic? Approximately.
The question is how many car lengths between the roundabout and the west access? I don't have an answer for that. We do have a left turn lane in this scenario. You know, the current bottleneck, someone makes a left turn, it stops everyone behind them. The idea would be is we could pull them off of there sooner. It's a couple hundred feet, so you divide that by cars. Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer.
My fear is that that bottleneck right there is going to back traffic up around that roundabout, so that your roundabout is no longer going to work correctly the way it was intended. Second point number 2, and if you're coming from the east driving to the west, is that roundabout going to be flat, or will the center be raised for something in the middle, like the one that was put on 1806? Because as you're driving from east to west, and I come into that roundabout, and if I am on the far north corner, my line of sight to that crosswalk, I don't care if I'm going 20 miles an hour, I don't think that I'm gonna have enough time to stop before seeing that kid in that crosswalk. And the kid's dark. Okay, that is another fear. How big is that roundabout?
The question is the size of the roundabout, and the first comment was just queuing beyond through the roundabout. The roundabout is about 180 feet in diameter from the center, so it's pretty large roundabout. And the center would not be traversable, designed to be traversable, but certainly the lines of sight would be looked at as you go in through the design. And as Adam talked about, the idea is to kind of smooth out some of those hills. And so certainly if you know, I know what you're saying on the far side, is that roundabout going to be so high that you can't see across it? And so I think that that's a great point that will be looked at and verified during the design, so that you wouldn't have such a scenario where you couldn't see that. You're also slowly circulating around, so you're supposed to come to that decision point later, but of course you want to make sure that there is good visibility across all sites, because you're right, there is a lot of terrain there. From the queuing comment at the beginning, again, we did model this with literally almost twice as much traffic to see if it worked with those various scenarios. And we didn't see any of the queuing that go all the way through the roundabout in that specific scenario. More likely, you just end up trying to get your turn on from Valley to get into that lane there.
And then I have 2 more quick points here. As you come in, so in this particular scenario, if you could go back to the drawing of the school. As you come into that west entrance, having the flow now go clockwise, okay? In your drawing, you're coming in, you go up the hill and you turn right. Well, if you're pulling into those parking spaces, the back end of your car is now facing the school, and so you literally have to physically turn to watch your kid and say, hey, Mom, is this black car over here? Instead of facing the school where you have a much wider view. So has that been looked at? How many more blind spots by turning the vehicles backwards?
So the configuration could be flipped if you wanted it to be able to look at the school. Certainly as you open the car door and the kid goes out, the idea is when you pull your traffic off, when you move it through, as opposed to letting it sit for so long, that you can see in the video, you're minimizing the amount of conflicts, because the cars are being able to turn over, and most people are going to find their earlier spots as opposed to driving all the way through. So as we compared when cars were and PEDs were conflicting, we were finding that it was fewer than, if you drop in that far left lane and you're meandering through lanes, and drivers could be looking every different direction to try to get in and out. So I'm not going to say that we've minimized all the conflicts. We certainly looked at how we could reduce them. however, through this process of this layout.
And then one last point, someone had talked about going into the east. Currently, we are going into the east entrance when we come up to the right-hand side of the school, and some of us do go out towards, onto Eudora, onto Washington, but because of the elevation of the hill, your line of sight is so quick, is that being looked at, possibly being changed to increase that line of sight? Because that hill is a problem, and there have been some nasty accidents at that corner.
So the question is regarding the hill within the school property. Oh. No, that's outside of the scope and study of this project. So Durango and Washington was the intersection I believe you're talking about, right to the north. Yeah, so certainly that's not to say that at some point it couldn't be resolved as part of a different project, but again, really the intent we came into was Ash Coulee, and then we brought the school in because we just felt like the clear marriage between the school and the corridor. We wanted to think about them in a partnership, and so it's always hard to find where to stop, but yeah, we didn't look at those particular lines of sight out there.
Yeah, on that roundabout, on the sidewalk on the south side there, our pedestrians protected there. You can come around that roundabout and then stop in the roundabout because of the sidewalk on the south side.
You're talking about that line right there? So the question is about...
Yeah, that's the sidewalk, right?
Yep. So the question is about the south approach of the roundabout at Valley. Again, it'd be a very similar context as the other approaches.
When you're coming into it, you're exiting that to get on the Valley. You're coming around the roundabout, and then how is that pedestrian getting on that sidewalk protected?
Sure.
Light there, a stop, you're gonna have a stop sign on the roundabout? What are you gonna do there?
No, there's no stop as you come in and throughout the roundabout as you're allowing those crossing maneuvers.
There has to be some way to protect the pedestrian.
Yep, so a typical roundabout does have yield signs on all approaches, but obviously you're talking about once you're already within the circle and you're exiting, it creates a different conflict, right?
It's back to where there's a hump in the middle that driver has to see across that roundabout to see if there's a pedestrian on the south side.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another comment about the sight lines of sight on the roundabout.
Yeah, I'd like to add too that this graphic here is a conceptual stage. It doesn't have all the components of the actual design what it'll be in. We'll have a similar median that we're showing on the west side here will be on the south side as well. So the crossing distance and the lanes that they have to travel to try to get past that intersection will be reduced so that it's a much safer scenario in crossing. And yeah, I apologize that we didn't show that island on the south side here. That should have been in there.
I echo some of the other concerns about the roundabout. I know that's in play today with street design. I don't like putting a roundabout on a T. It's not a four-way. It's I hear concerns with calming traffic is the phrase that's used. I think you're talking about speed control. That's not as roundabout design. I don't like the pedestrian safety aspect around the roundabout. You have folks trying to navigate cars, and then you're putting a pedestrian in the mix. I think that's a conflict. Plus, one thing I don't think that is emphasized enough is the studies on roundabouts. They decrease the severity of accidents, but they actually increase the frequency of accidents. So I'm not interested in traffic control near a school that has the potential to increase the frequency of traffic accidents.
Okay, the question was regarding the roundabout and the concerns with it being on a T intersection, having pedestrians access it there, and then also the potential for increase of accidents even if the severity is going down. Did you have some comments?
Yeah, the data all shows single lane roundabouts do reduce total crashes as well. It's the multi-lane roundabouts that do see a total increase because of some of the side swipes. But from a single lane perspective, it's safety increases across the board from every study that I've seen. So.
Sort of mentioned earlier, so the first part is west of the roundabout, hopefully stop sign intersection. Are they gonna flatten that out so your line of sight is better going to the west? And then the second thing is, what about lighting, especially west of there, because it's dark, really dark. And I think, for pedestrians, especially with all those nice paths that we have, and a lot of people moving through there, it's hard a lot of the times, especially in the winter, to see a lot of people that are utilizing those trails.
Yes, I understand your concern about lighting there, and this project, the intent is to add lighting along the whole corridor, similar to what we see on 43rd, going to the east further that way. We'll have a similar lighting level along this project. We want to mitigate those concerns with this one. Oh, and sorry about the hill, yeah. So west of this intersection, there are some hills that have some sight distance issues, and the intent of the project is that we're going to be addressing those hills, either raising up the incoming curve, the sag curve coming into it, or taking the top of the hill down so that we can kind of flatten that out, improve sight distance in those situations.
I was on the water tower to the horizon entrance side of the hill, and given that the road was originally made the first time, there really wasn't much input with regard to the grade and stormwater. Will there be any effort to tie in how the elevation of the road will match the current lot lines on the people that live along the road? And also, if there's going to be a study to show what the stormwater drainage is currently, and how a road change and elevation would impact stormwater with the waters from homeowners.
Yeah, so the question was, how are the properties that are currently directly accessing Ash Coulee Drive, how will they be impacted with the grade changes in the roadway and the widening of the roadway and other aspects, along with the stormwater and how it is interacting with the roadway and the changes. In addressing the stormwater, we are designing, or we have completed a general model of this whole area and all the basins draining to this roadway. We calculate the amount of stormwater that is involved with those, and we are sizing pipes and ditches and try as much as possible to use the natural drainage routes and try to bring that water either onto the road through ditches to the natural drainage route, and a combination of methods to take care of all of those. Also, the properties that are directly accessing the roadway, those will be a high priority for us to make sure that those driveways are accessible. We're not making them, not very friendly. We don't want to make them like that. We want to keep them friendly. We want to keep them, level. We'll try to bring the roadway as much as possible to the elevation of those driveways and maintain at least a minimum grade on those driveways out there.
On that east entrance into the school, one of my concerns there is if you look at the angle of the traffic that's going to be turning north into the school from the east. That traffic could be blocking line of sight for cars coming out with traffic that's going to be traveling west without having to slow or stop through that section.
Are you talking about this movement here?
Yeah, those turning vehicles might block line of sight towards the cars that are driving straight. It's like, it could be a point that could cause some additional accidents. And then the second piece, I guess I'd say too, is if a roundabout ends up being what we need there, elevation would be a concern for me as well, both for sight, but also when the eastbound section of 43rd or Ash Coulee was completed. A few years ago, they had that so much lower than the surrounding terrain, and snow was a serious problem where the entire 2 lanes got drifted in. You couldn't even drive on those lanes. So, similar issue there. I hate to see that roundabout be unusable after light winds and things like that.
All right, so the comment about the roundabout was regards if the roundabout was lowered than the surrounding terrain, it'll be a snow trap essentially, and you're worried that that'll be difficult to maintain throughout the winter and so forth. Yeah, and that is definitely a concern that we need to be able to address with this project. And we try to mitigate snow traps as much as possible by grading surrounding the area, not having abrupt changes in the grading, like having the back slopes go up really abruptly. That will be a snow trap, as you mentioned. And we'll try to mitigate that and take that in consideration in the design if this is the route that is chosen out here. Did you have any comments about the driveway?
Yeah, in regards to the driveway conflict point issue, since we are changing the primary entrance, we are expecting a lot of these drivers to not make that right turn in there to come through so they can, come back around under this scenario. It's a bad arrow. So that conflict is it's okay, right? We want that driver that's turning left to wait for those drivers to come through. And since we have 2 lanes designed to pull that through, there'll be enough gaps in traffic to be able to make that movement out. But yes, those people are in your line of sight, but if they're there, you should yield to them and then wait till you have that gap. And the way that the signal's configured there, we do have some natural ebbs and flows as cars dump in and out there.
With regard to the drop-off of the children, and I don't have a middle school child, so I have nothing but the safety of other children, or of children. With regard to my comment, I agree with the lady about, vehicles should face north instead of south, because it's easier for the driver to see other vehicles when they pull out. But a concern that my wife mentioned to me is, if you have vehicles pulling off and dropping children off throughout this entire parking lot, the cars leaving, you have children crossing the parking lot at all different points, not just one point. And so you have vehicles leaving, and instead of one crosswalk or anything, now they drop them off right at the school. Everyone knows that's where the kids are walking. But here they can be walking from the vehicle to a sidewalk and anywhere along that corridor. And that's just a concern when you're dealing with fairly young children. So I don't know if that's been thought about or any way to address that.
Yeah, so the question was that the comment was that currently, we have 3 lanes going through there. People get to the crosswalk, and basically 3 cars drop them off, and they cross in the crosswalk. And so there's very few issues as far as the students going into the school. However, on this scenario, we might have 30 cars all stopped at one time at different points, and those kids will be getting out and going across into the school. And so it's a bit unpredictable on where those will happen. And is there a problem with students possibly having, an accident? And that's the last thing we want out there. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, so as it stands today, a lot of parents do try to get right in front of the school, but there are parents dropping in the second, the third lane. And so there is some unpredictability out there today. In that situation, you're kind of meandering through cars that are looking side to side to be able to get out of their spot. And so I think I've heard stories beforehand of people parking in about 11 different spots and their kids dropping in and out. And so there's a lot of predictability out there today. Our hope is that if we can improve the efficiency, and then as you can see on that number 3, we're pulling them through in an area that we don't have the pedestrians crossing. And then what we have in that kind of speckled color is potentially a raised crosswalk for those students coming from Ash Coulee. And so overall, we're not eliminating the overall conflict potential, but we feel like we're making it far more predictable and reducing the overall amount of just back-to-back cars being able to conflict. And so again, coming back to that video that I showed earlier, just when you reduce the feel of that congestion, there isn't as many cars as it feels like there is, 3 lanes full of cars, but if you can move them through, it's not as many conflicts as you pull through in that area.
Is there anybody from the school here that can address parking? I'm assuming you got it involved.
Yeah, we have some school people here. Actually, we have the principal and the facilities manager here, if I want to single them out over there. They are available to talk after this if you wish to pose questions to them as well. But we have been involving them in this, and they've been aware of all these concepts that we've been developing, and we've been working with them. And they are, whether or not these things on the school actually get implemented, the decision will ultimately lie with them on if they want to do this or not. I mean, they could just leave it as a 3-lane pull-through right now, just going the opposite direction if they wanted, and that's perfectly fine as well if we wanted to do that. So,
Just with the actual construction of the equipment that's going to be used to move do the construction. We live on Mustang Drive during some of the construction that is going on. We usually have our street used as a staging area for equipment, for materials, Class 5 being brought in for building equipment and stuff. Just like, I'd like it to be noted that keep this equipment, keep this construction equipment off of the current residential streets so that they're not beat up. And we had street rebuild looks great, but I want to do that turning
Yeah.
the road once again. So bring it up at this meeting at this point in time so you can put something in for the contract.
Mhm.
Keep those guys off. Keep the heavy balls
Yeah, thank you.
out of the residential area.
Yeah, very good comment. The comment was about the construction equipment out here being staged on side streets out there, and the intent would be to not allow that to happen. The contractor would have to have a designated approved location that the city would approve for staging of their equipment and so forth out there. And we can build that into the contract documents that he's not allowed to stage on these residential roadways adjacent to the project. And I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
With the construction going on all through the summer for 6 or 7 months, and winds coming from the northwest at 20 to 50 miles an hour, I'm sure your contractor will have enough water trucks out there to keep the dust down from blowing into all the houses, and the residents will be given a number to call if they don't think it's adequate on a particular day.
Yep, the question was about dust control during construction with heavy winds, and that is definitely a concern. And good thing we have Gabe, right? We can always call him up and complain. But no, you will be given access to a number that you can contact the contractor or contact the project manager, I should say, the construction manager out there, to make them aware if there's some issue with the construction that you are feeling is impacting your property. There will be contacts available for the residents on the roadway.
It sounds to me like you've done a lot of traffic patterns as far as cars, but has there been a study on the actual pedestrian patterns as to what is truly happening?
So the question was about pedestrian patterns, and have we studied that? I'll let Mike speak.
If we've collected pedestrian crossings at all the primary intersections, it certainly doesn't track how far they go in and out to different locations, but that's similar how we track traffic is really, we dial into several intersections along the corridor, and we count everything that goes through it. We try to deduce in between. So we do have volumes. Earlier I said 220 pedestrians crossing Ash Coulee at various locations. More than that on a normal day when it's nice out. So there certainly is quite a few pedestrian crossings.
Any more questions here? Seems to be calming down quite a bit. Well, we can probably close the Q&A time here, but we will be around here until, well, at least 8:30. But feel free to come and talk to us personally if you feel more comfortable speaking to us directly rather than in front of the whole crowd. And I really appreciate you coming here and participating and giving us your input. We need this, and these kind of comments will help us to know how we need to progress this project in a way that makes everybody happy with it. So,
What's the next step then? Will there be another public information meeting, or go to the city commission or learn something?
yeah, so the question was, what is the next step here? Are there going to be any more public meetings or ways of expressing what you do and do not like out on this? The comment period will be open for about 2 weeks after this project or after this presentation, this meeting today. So you can feel free to leave comments anytime in the next 2 weeks. This will also be presented to the City Commission in March, and it's always open to all the public to come and speak at those meetings, I believe. Do you have anything to say about the commission meeting?
So by the time we put this on the commission agenda, we do have the ability for the public to provide written comments at that point in time. And anything on the agenda, if the public wish to speak on an item that's not a public hearing, this would not be a public hearing, the commission decision on this item. There's an opportunity at the very beginning of every meeting for about a half hour worth of time to speak on any regular agenda item or consent agenda item that's not a public hearing, so it gives you the board an opportunity at that point to address the board with whatever comments you want to address at that point.
Thank you, everybody, so much. We'll close the meeting with that.